Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here, and I got Jackie Stuck.
Yeah.
Say hi, Jackie.
Hello.
Yeah, bad timing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know I'm out of Dallas. He's over in Denmark, and today we're talking with doing our short talk on basically on running scripts on multiple computers and dealing with some of the fun stuff, like especially when I was working in corporate world too. I had two laptops at work, and then I had, I think, three main computers at home that I'd be running my scripts on, often the same ones. And so especially this is like, I don't know, so maybe 7 years ago, where it became problematic because I wanted to really have one script, right, running on all of them, or at least try to have one. And that's where I ran into issues. One of the ones, and I want to say it might have been Tank. I can't, but no, it wasn't Tank, but it was forever ago. But I posted a question on the forum about it, and someone suggested using Dropbox, which I had never heard of. This is a long time ago, before it was big at all. And so sure enough, I installed it. I'm like, wow, this is amazing, right? But it did have some issues where I would occasionally have a conflicting file get created from it, which is one issue with using Dropbox, but that's not really what this chat's about. But the one of the big ones is, and we had a chat a couple of weeks ago, I think, about running multiple scripts versus one script, and that was where I realized, especially for my hotkeys on launching programs, I don't have all the same programs on every computer, right? And so that became a problem because I'd go hit the hotkey, and it would go look for a program for the path. And here's a little deviation of that, right? Even if I had the same program, they may not be in the same path. So also like with AutoHotkey or with Site or whatever I was using at the time, they'd have two different paths because they were just installed in different places. And so that was problematic and loads of fun. The easy one solution for that, what I did is, and I used the registry hack for it, but you can also use a batch command, and I'm blanking on the name of it. But it basically you can create a drive, a fake drive. So I create a B drive, and then I install programs I want on all my computers under that path. And then every computer I work on, the paths are all the same. That's how also I do all my stuff in AutoHotkey. Everything is under the B drive / whatever, and every path is always the same. So no matter what computer I go to, they're all the same path. So that really helps. It's not substring because but man, what is that batch command? I'll search for it when Jackie's talking here. Yeah, Jackie, what else pops in your mind of the issues that you run into on multiple computers?
Yeah. I can't say for sure that it's really from running one script on a computer, but at least the idea of sharing scripts between computers can be, at least for me, when I might be working on a larger project and I might be doing it on multiple computers because I have one here at home, I have the other one over here in the corner, and I have one more inside the other room. And one of them is more portable than the rest, and then I have work computers as well. And I'd say that if I didn't have something like Dropbox, and I didn't always have that, having something on a thumb drive is also a way of doing it, and AutoHotkey works just fine with the script on a thumb drive. But I ran into having so many different copies of the same script, and of course, most of the time that's not a problem because you know which one you have been working on last, and you might even have a good idea of giving it some kind of numbering system, version number or whatnot. But still, then I'm working at maybe at work on something, and I'm like, I got to 9, right? So I'll just go to 10 here, and then I get home and like, what's 10? I think I got to 10, or maybe I got to 11. So I didn't get it home with me today, so I'll just jump to 12 just to be sure that I have not scrambled it, and it just became unmanageable.
Yeah.
With doing it that way. So now with always having some kind of SkyDrive where you can always access that one file, that has helped quite a lot. Not because I have, like you have, a separate drive where everything is stored. I'd still use it from the drive location, but yeah, it would be on the C drive in that virtual folder that something like Dropbox or OneDrive creates, and it works just great.
Which actually, that reminds me. So, sorry. At TI, at the end of the last year or so I worked there, they stopped access to Dropbox, and so it made it painful again. But what I did, and I couldn't create my V drive, but so I had to install AutoHotkey in its normal spot. But what I did was I used AutoHotkey to get the path of wherever it was installed, and then I used that as a variable. So it would say like basically path and then a file structure, and that way I kept the files the same, the paths, because I did a lot of stuff using paths to files, and so it was very problematic. But that was one other way I worked around that issue, was just using AutoHotkey to derive the path of where it's installed, and then basically, what's that called in HTML when you have like your root directory? You can tell where you are, right? And then just go down, from there to wherever.
Yeah, I don't know if it's called anything but the root. It probably is. You have some kind of root spot that might be the public folder or whatnot, and from there, and then you have this. If you at least know it, and I don't know it well enough, you have these. What do we call it? I can't remember it either, but you don't always need to include the entire path, just as long as you include the relative path to a resource. So yeah.
By the way, the DOS command was subst. It's a short term for substitute, but you pick a folder and you say, I'm going to substitute this as a drive, and so you can create a drive out of a folder and everything beneath it. So that was another way. The problem with that approach is you can't easily control. Windows 10's better, but it's still not as easy. But you can't easily control which script is going to start first. And so if that command doesn't run first and you have other scripts trying to launch off of that path, it'll say this drive doesn't exist. So I use one where I hack the registry, and it actually exists before Windows ever boots up. And so that way I never have the issue. But
Yeah. Windows probably, I don't know exactly when it reads the registry, but it probably reads it pretty early in the boot process. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I'd say I while I was talking just before, I had a thought where at one point I was making a script, and I was making it for someone else, and a lot of it was stuff that was going on maybe in Excel, but at least a lot with numbers, and some of it was pulled out in another program, and it had kind of attached itself to the windows, and when you move the window it would move along, and all of those different types of things. But what stumped me for a long time was I was writing it, and he was paying me. It was great. And the thing was that some of the stuff I had didn't actually work the same, even though it was this file, I'm writing it, and he was using it directly from my online link, or I might send him the file and stuff like that. And I found out that it was actually that in Europe, the comma is used as the separator, and in America the dot is used as the number separator, or however you call those. But yeah, it actually meant that a lot of the stuff that AutoHotkey normally uses dot for makes good sense in the numbers and stuff like that. But when it pulled it out of the program, it would come out with them. But in America, it would automatically convert them to dots, and it would come out as commas. So the entire script actually had to know which which country it was being run in. And that's, of course, not correct, but I found a way for it to check what system language separator it had. But still, it was interesting to be running a script on multiple computers in that aspect. So if it could have been my own computers, actually, that had those differences. And it's just not something that I would have thought of normally.
Yeah. The other one I was going to bring up was the which I've done this before, where I'll write stuff, and to your point, that's what made me think about it, was I'll give it to other people, and they'll want things to be slightly different. And so I'll have the same script, but when I run it on different computers, like let's say I want to put in their first name, right? So I'll use the built-in variables like a_computer name or a_username, and then I'll use logic off of that, right? So that way I can write one script that says, hey, if the computer name, I think my computer name used to be Godzilla. I can't remember if it's still that because we had to reformat everything a while ago. But if it's Godzilla, put in Joe, and then if it's not Godzilla, I could say put in John or something, right? Or if it's it has a different name, or the username, and it allowed me to still have one script, but it would use logic within the script to behave differently if I was either a different user on the computer, if you wanted that, or if you had a whole different computer, you could have it doing that way.
Yeah, exactly, and it's worth having in your mind that depending on whatever the use of your script is, it can be yourself that's moving between computers, and they might even have different OSs. At least I've happened that. It might also have different user levels. Like when I'm at home, I have admin rights, but when I'm at work, I don't. So if I used a snippet at one point that would always try to make the script run as admin. And as soon as I actually tried using it at work, it just entered this bad loop of not being able to make it admin, but it kept trying because
that's your logic.
The code wasn't better than it just kept on going. So it would crash itself or whatever actually happened. I can't really remember what happened, but at least it just didn't work. And it wasn't because the code per se didn't work. And at home, I would have never known that was an unreliable way of doing it until I actually ran it on a system where I couldn't make it admin, where it didn't have. So running scripts on multiple computers is just, I feel often that you need multiple computers to at least have an idea of.
Well, and not just that, but to your point, the other computer, you don't want two exactly the same, right? You want one that's much more like you said, like I was the same way at work. I luckily could turn off my UAC, but at a point, it finally changed where I couldn't do that. And but you're right, like you run into headaches that you don't realize. Everything works perfectly fine, same OS even, right? We're both running Windows 10, and yet I'm just at work, and things don't work the same way. And part of the other one was, like, at work, certain things would get launched as an admin. I don't know if they were actually as an admin, but I had to launch my AutoHotkey code as an admin, I thought, to get it to the same level, but I'm not sure if that was it. But in order for it to work, it had to be run as an admin, which I could do. But it's still like you have to know and you have to test for this stuff, and it's something that's running on different computers that you sure don't expect. Not when you're new to coding, and there's all these things like the UAC, and the running things at an admin level, and having where your temp variable is stored, right, or wherever. I mean, there's so many little random things that like you wouldn't think would matter, and boy, they can matter. Or the path to, right? Also the path, like what is your system path, right? And if certain programs, like on one computer, your system path is there, like let's say Office and Excel is in my system path at home, but at work it's not, and I just say run this Excel file, it won't know what to do, right? So the little thing, unless the file association's there, but anyway, you get the point.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing, because again, you might have, and of course also in time you learn to look up paths to specific programs in the repository, so that you can actually know where it's placed, or if it has those kind of stuff, or you could check if Excel was installed, or what version it was, and stuff like that. So yeah, some of those built-in things that you have access to, even though you might not be admin, even on a work computer, you would still have read access, I'd guess, to the registry. You might, depending on whatever policy your work has, you might not have access to write to it. You might have in the user area of it, but yeah, it has a lot of information that tells you system specifics. So, and it tries to do it in a consistent way. So if the program is installed on this computer, it will put it in this place in the registry. But at least at one point, I had a lot of trouble with going from 32-bit programs to 64-bit programs, because the registry actually is different, or actually exists to parallel versions of it. Yeah. And to me, I really still haven't actually figured out exactly how you get between those. I know there's snippets of code, Lexicos has made some and stuff like that can let a 64-bit program put stuff in the 62-bit registry and vice versa, but still, that's.
Well, another example of what you just discussed, though, was which I hadn't thought of, and I've run into this, where let's say I'm at home and I get something working with Excel. I don't even know what the versions are, I'm running now, but let's say it's 10. I don't know what they are. But like, and I have Excel 10 at work, so I'll go into work. Oh, this will work fine, and nothing works at all, right? And it's like, wait, hey, they both have the Excels in the path, all the stuff, but the bitness of AutoHotkey has to match. Like if they're both 32 at home and at work you're running 64-bit version of Excel, then it doesn't work. And boy, I went through that route once and wanted to beat my head against a wall. Actually, even within AutoHotkey, my screen clipping one, right? People occasionally are like, hey, there's nothing here. And I'm like, I gotta say, like 100 people have installed this thing. I've never heard this. And it turned out what's the GDIP? Is that what's called? The library, like image library. Yeah. It was only a 32-bit version of it, not a 64-bit version. So it didn't work on 64-bit. So I had to tell the script that was running to say, hey, make sure if this gets launched, only run the script in 32-bit version of AutoHotkey, and then it worked, right? Instead of someone else is like, well, here's the other live whatever. I just said, you know what, it doesn't matter, right? It'll just force it always to 32-bit. But little things like that.
I'd say the biggest piece of software I have right now, I've chosen to simply compile it with the 32-bit version of AutoHotkey, because, hey, of course it's Unicode, but still going with the 32-bit because it's just been more compatible with all of the libraries that I needed and all of that stuff. And again, we've talked about this before. Speed, it's maybe not always that important. And at the beginning of my AutoHotkey career, and of course that might slowly be a long time ago, there wasn't much benefit from switching from 32 to 64-bit.
Right.
Yeah. And by keeping that in mind, I've chosen to go with 32-bit, even though Windows 10, I believe, is almost exclusively 64-bit. But there are still lots of 62-bit or 32-bit programs there. So yeah, to me, it just makes more sense.
Yeah.
For now, at least.
Cool. Is there anything else? I'm trying to think of what else with running it in multiple computers. I guess there's just the whole thing. If you're doing some sort of a GUI and understanding different resolutions, again, it's not AutoHotkey's fault. That's just any program has to deal with that, right? In understanding when you're running on different resolutions, it's a lot of math that happens in the background to reshape something. If especially if you're scrunching it down, or changing the dimensions, I guess is a better way to say it. It looked pretty bad, but.
I've seen a lot where people are maybe have a 4K monitor, and to still be able to actually read the text and stuff like that, they've used the text DPI.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yep. And change that to make the text and stuff like that appear bigger, to make it still readable. Having a lot of room on screen and having the text a little bit bigger might be nice enough on the eyes. But the problem is that if the programs are aware of this, they'll scale to it, and that will put off any kind of coordinates or other types of stuff that you have going on if you actually need to use those type of things.
Interesting. Yeah,
it's just some have that. So even your monitor, even though that whatever you made works great with that program, but because people have a different graphic card, different monitor, whatnot, different resolution, different DPI, all of those different types of things can make whatever you did over here not work over here. So yeah.
Which reminds me, which we've touched on quite a bit before. I'm trying to remember. I use find text a lot, right? That function. What's the built-in AutoHotkey version for the finding of an image?
Image search.
Image search. Thank you. That's another one. Just when you're working on different computers, right? That resolution and your fonts installed and the colors and like there's so many aspects that you wouldn't think would make a big difference, but boy, they definitely can.
Yeah, I'd say I have. Do you remember we made at one point something in an emulator where you were for a client doing some preliminary research on interacting with a phone app, maybe.
Oh, sure, yeah, right.
Yeah, and the thing I was doing something like it also in an emulator. And even though I had just taken the image piece from my own screen, stored it, and then put that in as the path in image search, a one-to-one search, one without variance, wouldn't find it. Even though I had just taken it, and the image was still, there wasn't any kind of, I think I needed maybe a 20 color variance for it to actually find it. And that's just because, or at least as I saw it, because I tried to take a couple of images with some time between and then manually going in and comparing them. And there was something in the rendering that kind of made the colors flicker, might be right. There wasn't any lighting going on or anything, but still, for some reason, each time it rendered a specific area of the screen, it would do it in a slightly different way. And why that is, I don't know exactly. But
help me and just make sure I understand this too. That's more on the video card or window. It's not your screen, right? Just making sure I understand, because I don't play with it as much.
But the thing with that is, it might be the program, it might be the rendering engine that the program uses, it might be the way that your graphic card interprets it. It might be the graphic card driver. It might be the video mode like DirectX or OpenGL or whatever.
So it's simple.
There's so many possibilities to what might be giving you that small thing, and it will frustrate people like, whoa, because you can't see it. With the naked eye, you can't see it.
Which is why your one, and was it doing, it's not the OCR one. You had one where you took that image and you shrunk it way down and not grayscaled it or something, right? And it did such a great job finding it, it was crazy. And that negated a lot of some of those issues.
Exactly.
Really
as
cool.
soon as the area that needed to be compared to something else became large enough, the algorithm and the smoothing and all of that stuff, by shrinking it, made it work so much better than a simple variation of color. Just by doing that and using a histogram of the colors and other parts to get a percentage difference, that just worked wonders in that situation. And it's worth keeping in mind that by removing that small variation, that might be the thing, because even the shrinking one had the need for, what would you say, a threshold of some sort.
Yeah.
It had, I think I used a threshold of 3. So if a pixel was variated 3 up or 3 down in color, it would still be compared as exactly the same, and that made it work quite well. It wasn't exactly the same per se, but instead of it needing a variation of 20 or even more, maybe 40 and 60 in some places where the lighting actually did change, the 3 made it so consistent that it might be, let's say it was 0.016% off from being exactly. So when I compared 2 images that was exactly the same, a still image that I'd copied, it would say 0 difference. So it worked on the same image. So and when the image had just a little thing, maybe a red line or something very, very subtle, small thing, it would at one point say that the difference was maybe 1%, and the same amount of red pixels in a different place would be 0.12. So it wasn't absolutely precise, but it was still very, very close. Because if it's the same amount of red pixels, it should have returned the exact same number in percentage of difference.
Right. Yeah, I get the point. Yeah. So to jump back, get back closer to track. But the thing I would say with this part of discussion is which is why I know we both always go this route. When you can use like COM or ascending controls or whatever, over comparing images, always do that, right? When that's an option. If
the program has an API, if it's a part of the COM object module, if the programmers implemented that when they actually made it, and all of those other different ways, I remember what he did, but I can't remember his name. But he had a tutorial on sending messages to Winamp. So
Raptor X.
Yeah, Raptor X, exactly. Yep. He figured out, or however he did it, exactly which messages you needed to send to the Winamp window to make it play and pause and fast forward and stuff. And those messages are built into Windows. So when you send that, it was it was way more reliable than you saying, move the mouse to this spot and click it. Because even though that's reliable enough and the computer will absolutely do it, but if the window is halt or
But it's reliable on one computer, right? And back to this topic where we're talking about different computers, just forget about it, right? Anyway, but keep going. Yeah, as you're right.
Yeah. Or until you had resized the Winamp window, or maybe extended the playlist, or whatever it might have been that you did yourself on your computer that would make that coordinate no longer work. Or, you cut out an image, you search for the play arrow in the play button, and now you resized it, or Winamp got a new theme or a new texture or whatever it might have been, that image wouldn't have worked. So that would be the same as going to a different computer where someone used a different theme for their Winamp, but the message sent was the same because it was built into Winamp.
Yeah. And it's blindingly fast, lightweight. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other overall lesson I think we would encourage is, man, when you can, dive deeper into using COM or sending controls or whatever, as opposed to looking and clicking on an image, which we still do it at times, right? We still do that, but it's just when you can avoid it, especially when you're talking about you're going to give stuff to other people to run on their computers. It's far more reliable.
Yeah, and that's the exact thing, right? Running a script on multiple computers. You can be doing it or you can be sharing it, but the idea you need to have in your head is that if you think it works on your computer, why does it work on your end? Does it work because it's always in the same spot? Because then it will not be in the same spot on another computer. Or does it work because you know that this message does that exact action? Then you know, maybe not for 100% sure, but then it should at least be as reliable as it can, even on other systems.
Yeah, I love it. That's really good food for thought when you think about how you're going to do something, is isolating what really is going to be similar. Because dealing with everything with the resolution and all the points you made earlier about your graphics card and your drivers and just so many things affect what's actually there versus sending controls, some sort of a API or something. Actually even reverting back to web pages, right? And if people have their browsers set up differently, even then that can be problematic as well. I remember we did something years ago, and I can't remember if it was your computer or my computer, but it wouldn't do quite the same way. And we went through each of those damn little checkboxes under the IE settings, right? Mm-hmm. And finally, like mine, I think maybe it had to do with like programmatic access to the clipboard might have been the one we looked
at. Something like that, yeah.
And it was like, well, that's why, because mine wasn't checked and yours it was, right? But it's a tiny little nuanced thing that we're sure we even existed. We just had to read through this ridiculously long page and then even then compare every option, right, to try to get them set the same. But so even then we were using COM and, well, actually sort of using COM at that point. I think we were sending the control to paste something. But
it was a combination.
But it's always, let's just actually, maybe that should have in the very beginning, is like when you're sharing something with yourself on another computer, generally speaking, it's not too bad. But boy, when you start talking about having 3 or more people using other OSs and they're not local, and like, oh boy, you can really have a lot more problems than you'd think, right? And it's not AutoHotkey's fault. It's just how you're designing, which actually that's what I think it's a really interesting way to phrase it, is start thinking about the commonalities you have between the computers. Is it the window itself and how it's located? Is it the programs? Is it what kind of paths are you using a path? How are you detecting what's installed? Back to the registry, right? There's so many things. And of course, this is why more robust solutions cost a lot of money, because they basically write programs that will figure this stuff out programmatically and account for it, adjust for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It might either go in, look through how many users has been logged on this computer, and who's logged on now, and are there an active database or whatnot. It might be going through all kinds of hoops and loops to figure out what to show you on the first image. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons I believe that Excel and Word and all of those programs are almost getting slower at the startup with each version at this time, because now it needs to log in at least to 365. Isn't that what it's called now? And it needs to check all kinds of stuff on your computer. Make sure that this is available and this is available. And which language do you have? Are you in Europe? Okay, I need to do it like that. Then this is over there. And instead of once upon a time, 10 years ago or whatnot, it would just check, okay, you're in Europe, here's the interface. Here you go. We're now.
Especially locally on your computer versus it's doing this across the internet, right? Which is just the bottleneck. Even if they're doing a good job reducing what they're sending, it's still a bottleneck.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's. A guess is that a good back and forth ping of some real data might still take half a second or something like that. And if it needs to get a response before going on, and then it might have to do it 1 or 2 times more just to get all of the stuff done in the right places. That would take 3 seconds extra. And when you are looking at your screen, just sitting there with your brain, you're like,
right,
this is taking forever. And if you actually timed it, it took 21 seconds. But it just feels like, oh my God, the relativity of whatever time you feel is just Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Is there anything else? You think we're good?
I think we would. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. That was good. Just so everyone, that one is, it's, keep at it and expect, to have to work through stuff, basically, right? It's often there's no issues, but boy, don't be surprised when you get them.
No, of course, with the complexity of what you're trying to do, the complexity of going to a new system will, of course, increase. Right. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah.
See ya.
And bye.